Welcome back, animal lovers, to Awakening with Your Animal Family. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Schoen, and it's a joy to see you again in the midst of all these challenging crises these days, and I hope you're all well. Today, I decided to change some the topics to keep on focusing on things that what you can do at home to keep your animal as healthy and you as healthy and happy as possible during this time of quarantine and the exposure to COVID. I know personally, I have family members in New York right now who are on the front lines and who do have COVID, and I'm sending out prayers and recommending supplements to them and the different things every day and keeping in contact with them. So it's definitely impacting on myself and impacting on so many countless people wherever we are. So today, my special guest is Jason Watkins, who is an authority studied and knows so much about pathophysiology, pharmacology, nutrition, and traditional Chinese medicine. And he's the co-founder of Purica Supplements for both animals and people. And he and I have been good friends for 15 years, and I'm always amazed at the wealth of knowledge that he has about things. So today we're going to be talking about some of the medicinal mushrooms that are being used for immune support, as well as some musculoskeletal supplements, because you may be having a challenging time getting to your veterinarian right now, or they may only be taking emergencies. So it's my goal to educate and empower you at what you can do at home. We're going to be talking about that. But before we get into that, and before I introduce this amazing speaker, Jason, I want to bring up some questions that my clients and my audience viewers are asking me about COVID and our dear animals. And the biggest question is this infectious? Is this contagious between us and our animal friends? And if it is, what can we do to prevent any issues? So my attitude is to be proactive and preventive. I'd rather be safe than sorry. Just a short while ago, as everything continues to change here, they were saying, oh, it's not infectious, what's called zoonotic, infectious from us to our animals and vice versa. And then some reports started coming out. Many of you may have heard about the dog in Asia or a cat that tested positive, but they didn't show any signs and everything seemed to resolve. The one dog did die, but it was 17 years old and there was no report of what the cause was. But just yesterday at the Bronx Zoo in New York City, they tested a tiger that was showing signs and it did come up positive for COVID. And there are other tigers and a lion there that are showing very similar signs, but to run these tests, they have to anesthetize and take the blood. So they did it just on the one, but they're assuming that they're all together and they're all showing similar respiratory signs. So they are showing signs that they are all indeed probably infected with COVID and probably picked it up from the employee at the zoo. So that sheds a whole new light on this. And I'm not bringing this up to bring up more fear or anything. To me, I'm bringing it up to make you aware, and then let's look at what we can do to prevent issues. Okay, so this is not a matter of fear, this is a matter of education and empowerment, which is the goal of the whole show. So the question is, okay, if there's continuing evidence that's unfolding that it may be infectious between us and our animals, what can we do? Now, the good news is one of the major top veterinary diagnostic labs has tested thousands of dogs and cats, and so far has not seen any evidence that they have it. Okay, there is suspicion in both humans and animals that maybe it can be transmitted through feces and things. There's so much that's unknown right now with this part of the COVID pandemic, as well as many others. So let's just look and focus. What can we do preventatively and proactively to prevent this from being contagious, potentially contagious between our animals and us? Okay, Number one, they have found it on animals' hair, and they're suspicious of that. So that number one, you should make sure to clean your animal's hair with an animal safe shampoo or spray disinfectant. Rather than me recommend some, we will discuss some, but you want to know from your veterinarian what they're recommending, because it depends on what's available in your area. And they would know what's available in your area that's safe. So number one is to clean the coat regularly, use gloves if you're petting them and everything. And especially if you or any family member has been exposed or potentially exposed to COVID, or is dealing with it, okay? You want to make sure, use gloves, don't be petting them or breathing on them, spreading it like that, because there is suspicion that it can be carried like that. If your animal's going outside and you're in an area like that, make sure to clean their paws, clean their coat and everything, just like you're doing for yourself. You want to clean your paws, okay? And wear gloves and everything. So make sure to do that. Then if for their food bowls, water bowls, wherever they're sleeping, make sure to keep all of that disinfected. Throw their bedding, any bedding that they're lying on, anything like that, in the wash regularly to keep that clean. Anything that can't be washed, make sure to spray down, again, with something that's animal safe, that's non-toxic. Those are my main suggestions, okay? And there may be more, and this is an unfolding situation. Keep in contact with your veterinarian. Your veterinarian is going to be your expert contact between what's unfolding and any issues with your dog or cat. If your dog or cat shows any signs of any respiratory or potentially gastrointestinal issues that may be associated with COVID, contact your veterinarian again right away. I do know of a client a while ago that had had a respiratory issue, and it showed up on x-rays. They were on antimicrobials, they healed, but then their cat showed up with very similar signs. And then they went and brought their cat to their veterinarian, and sure enough had similar clinical signs and similar x-ray evidence in the lungs. And so, it was treated, and the cat everyone recovered. The veterinarian was saying there's no evidence of anything like this being infectious. Again, my attitude is lack of evidence does not mean lack of incidence. And let's be proactive, preventive, think positively when you're brushing your cat, your dog, doing everything, do it with love. We'll talk about this later on in the show, the importance of our own attitude and the evidence of a positive attitude, a loving attitude, and how that improves your immunoglobulins, okay, and keeps you healthier. So do all of this with love and gratitude. And we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end as well. So with that interruption to normal TV, normal presentation, now I'd like to introduce you to Jason. Jason is a passionate speaker who's trained in pathophysiology, pharmacology, nutrition, and traditional Chinese medicine. And with that, developed some of the best nutritional supplements that I'm aware of. And we've been friends for over 15 years, and I know his products are great, and I take them. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Jason, and we'll start with discussing what medicinal mushrooms are and how they impact on the immune system. So Jason Watkins, welcome to Awakening with Your Animal Family. It's a joy to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it, Alan.
Yeah, so Jason, let's start. If you could give my audience, they're very educated animal lovers, and if you could just give them in a nutshell the basics of how medicinal mushrooms work to help our immune system. And what's beautiful, your company has all these supplements for both animals and humans. So you can go both ways on this. But to explain, are there ones that are antiviral? What is some of the research on that? And then if you can go over your favorite medicinal mushrooms for keeping the immune system healthy. So
Yeah.
let's start with that.
Okay. So obviously everybody's hearing the virus thing. So what I'd like to share is immunity, immunity. And that's what we're trying to do, is to see what can you do, obviously, to change how your immune system interacts with anything that's coming its way, as you know. So what we're looking at is, most people, when they think of the immune system, they think of antibodies. I mean, that's pretty much, a lot of people are thinking antibodies. So that's a third line of defense called innate defense. So I'll tell you what the mushrooms are doing. It's basically, it's very efficient, but it takes time to adapt and form new compounds. And there's the B cells, which are produced in the bone marrow. They mature in the bone marrow, and they're the ones that produce these antibodies that basically tag or make something gluey, so that it makes it harder for any microorganism to have its action and then attacked by another part of your immune system. And then there's these T cells that are also produced in your bone marrow. So bone, obviously, I'm getting here, bone's very important. They're produced in the bone marrow, and then they mature in the thymus. And they're the ones that can actually kill cells that have gone rogue, have had a virus infection. Because, as you know, the virus is not like a typical microorganism. It's basically genetic code wrapped in proteins and fats. And it requires another cell to basically cloak itself and get into your DNA and wait for the right time so that it can reproduce itself. So you got a lot of different spots in your immune system that you can improve, and mushrooms are very, very impressive. And there's a lot of research on this, is the other parts of the immune system, and this third one called adaptive. So the first line of defense, to make it simple, is your barrier immunity. And that is the skin, or on any animals, the skin. And then the largest part, it's a massive surface area, is the insides, anywhere where there's a hole on the outside of the body, the mouth, the rectum, the ears, the eyelids, the nose, are mucosal membranes that line that and act like a moat to keep everything out. So the skin has overlapping cells that act like an armor to keep things out. And if there's any breaches, cuts, or anything, a virus could enter there, other microbes could enter there. There's also defensive mechanisms there, though, to try to stop that. But the mucosal membrane is just like a moat, like I said, and it's got compounds in it. They're like alligators in your moat that are waiting for anything to try to get through. And that mucin's going to first trap it, and then the alligators and crocodiles and everything are going to annihilate it. That's your first line of defense. When I was in microbiology in university, that's your primal defense. That's the best defense. You actually keep things out of your castle. But some of them are going to get through. Then you have your second line of defense, which is still non-specific. In other words, it's going to attack anything that's foreign. And that second line is your innate immune system. The barrier system is part of the innate system too, but this innate system, you're born with it, and has all different types of white cells, and they basically go after everything. And they create inflammation, inside your digestive tract. There's immunoglobulins, there's inflammatory reactions with histamine, and those wall off different infections. But this innate system has cells that actually attack something that's outside by itself in the blood or in the other fluids, or it will attack a cell that's infected. One of them is called a natural killer cell. It actually attacks the thing that's infecting the cell. It attacks that cell that's been infected, and then it displays pieces of that antigen or that virus or microbe, whatever, on the outside of itself, as if it's an old warrior that has skulls and everything on the outside. So other cells can recognize pieces of that thing that's attacked, to make it more easily recognizable for the third line of defense, which is your adaptive system, which is what people think of. They think of their antibodies, their cytotoxic T cells. All these different cells are working in unison. So what's my point is that if you can improve the barrier, the mucosal membranes, and things that degrade the barrier, the biggest one of all is stress, because it's constantly breaking down. And if a person or an animal is stressed, it's not properly repairing itself. So it would be like degrading your moat. So the alligators might still be around, but now people can run past the alligators and jump up into your walls and get inside. Same with an animal. all these different invaders can get inside. So the idea is improve the barrier. Number one, improve your ability to cope with stress. And let's face it, we're around our animals a lot now. And if we're stressed, we're kind of giving it to the animals. We all know that. They feel the stress, just like horses. I grew up with horses and dogs and cats. And horses and dogs and cats, they all respond to your stress. So if they're feeling your stress, then they can be degrading those membranes and they can become more susceptible. So it's just as important, the mind-body medicine, as you know, because of the Indo-Tibetan studies I've done, is that you obviously need to get, control of your own stress level to help your animal, but then also the animal. And mushroom compounds and polyphenols, things that are found in green tea, for instance, some of the epigallocatechin gallate, EGCG, or quercetin is another one that they're researching. So in onions and green tea, these things actually inhibit virus from binding to receptor sites on your cells. They competitively inhibit that. Also, these compounds, these polyphenols and polysaccharides found in mushrooms and other colorful foods that you eat, they actually increase the production of interferons in your system. And interferons interfere with the binding, again, of different pathogens to your cells. So it's another route. And then thirdly, the epithelial lining cells that are producing your moat, you can increase the production of the mucosa and the health of mucosal layer by using compounds, in particular, both polyphenols, again, found in a lot of colorful foods, and polysaccharides, which are found in abundance in different mushroom compounds. So there's the first mechanism, is you're actually improving the barrier. In addition, you're inhibiting a virus from actually infecting a cell. And then you're producing a lot of compounds that are competitively inhibiting, and you're producing interferons in your own body that are interfering with viral replication. So you're coming at it from many different mechanisms, and it's really impressive. And there's a lot of data. People can just go look on PubMed and find a whole range of data on how it affects the mucosal coat, how it increases natural killer cells, how it increases interferon levels, and then how that is part of your overall immune system. So if I was to summarize, there's your barrier immunity, which is your first line of defense, mucosal membrane, skin. And then there's your innate, which is what people think of when they think of the leukocytes, the white cells and macrophages and phagocytes and natural killer cells, this kind of thing. And then there's your third line, which most people think of as the immune system, which is actually your last line of defense, is the B cells and T cells and antibody production and cytotoxicity.
Wow, thanks so much, Jason, for explaining all of it in a very easily understandable approach for all the animal lovers. So if you can go over like some of the main medicinal mushrooms that at a time like this that have antiviral properties, that are medicinal, that you would recommend people, their animals and humans, all of us, because you formulate these for humans and animals, which ones you think are the best? And then, like, can you combine them? And also, I'm sure my cat loving audience want to make sure that are all of these safe for cats, because cats always have their own unique metabolic system.
Yes, okay,
So,
that's very interesting. And that leads me to the idea of non-specificity across different species. And a lot of it has to do with not targeting a specific function in an animal that's different than a human, say. It's more or less targeting those non-specific defenses, your barrier immunity, which we all have that. The cats have mucosal layers and everything the same. They have integrity of the skin. So do dogs, so do horses. We also have all those white cells and natural killer cells, and we all have that. But in addition, if a virus was to get past all those and they get into your cell, they're going to need to hijack your DNA to replicate and rebuild themselves when the time's right. And then they'll lyse the cell and spill it into your blood and infect more. Well, you can actually use these different compounds, especially the polysaccharides from mushrooms, which I'll talk about specific ones, to interfere with viral replication along the structural, it's like a staircase, like one of those spiraling staircases. And think of the rails as the outside structural sugar building blocks. In the case of DNA, it's deoxyribose. In RNA, it's ribonucleic, or ribose, sorry. So you've got that outside structural set, and then inside you've got the nucleic acid base pairs. And that's what codes for information. Well, for instance, cordyceps, number one, That mushroom, tons of research, the most expensive natural product on the planet. I think it's now that for 1 pound of it is about $250,000 American for a pound of it. It's brought from the Himalayas. That's amazing. It's really expensive. It's also been, because they over harvested it, there's been some restrictions on it. So we grow all of our, for instance, our mushrooms in Nevada in a closed facility to produce really high levels of actives. But anyways, cordyceps, one of the compounds in cordyceps, it inhibits the replication on the outside structural staircase part, the rail, by inserting a compound that's like the ribose, but not quite. And a virus does not have protective repair mechanisms like a human does. So it can't repair itself, so it just stops, it stops producing itself. So it stops the replication cycle, boom, just like that. Whereas, same thing as a cancer cell. A cancer cell, it doesn't have proper repair mechanisms. So the same mechanism of action that has antiviral properties also has anti-cancer, anti-carcinogenic properties. And then the other one, HEAA from cordyceps, it actually gets inside the base pair in the nucleic acid, so inside, which would be like the spindles of the stairs, and gets in there and inhibits them from properly binding, and it cuts out its replication. So you effectively stop virus replication. It doesn't matter what type of virus it is, they're all using the same mechanism within the DNA, so you're still getting the same type of antiviral mechanism, which is huge, obviously, because you don't want to be targeting a specific virus all the time. Then you're always having to stay a step ahead. So some of these ancient methods from Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, all the science is now showing that even scientifically, it works at all these different levels. And then obviously, there's the issue of the COVID-19, which is actually the syndrome. For instance, HIV would be, to HIV to the AIDS syndrome, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, would be like the SARS-CoV-2 compared to COVID-19. So what we're talking about is the condition itself has to do with an overactive, sometimes, immune response. And so the key with mushrooms is they're not boosting your immune system, they're helping to modulate your immune system. So if it's too overactive, like an autoimmune disease, it helps to bring it down. And if it's underactive, it helps to pull it up. That's why you can take these things with autoimmune diseases, whereas some of the immune boosters like echinacea or different compounds or drugs, you can't, because they can overstimulate and cause more of an issue with autoimmunity. And then with autoimmunity, we have issues with people that are actually more susceptible with autoimmunity. And the interesting one for me is that now they're showing that insulin resistance and high blood sugar and diabetes, that that people that have those conditions have a greater risk of developing COVID. And so when you're stressed all the time, there's a chronic elevation of blood sugar and a decreased insulin sensitivity. So stress is the perfect position to get that high blood sugar that makes you more susceptible to disease, especially viral attacks. And it is the #1 strongest weakener of your immune system. So obviously you want to get that under control. They don't know how they do this, but certain mushrooms, they not only do they have really powerful antiviral properties, they boost the immune system, but they have anxiolytic or anti-stress properties, which I think is something that the ancients saw in the naming of the mushrooms, like reishi, they called it spirit mushroom, because it made people really calm and clear. And you can see how that would benefit, because if you can get into that calm, clear, parasympathetic state, you have a really strong immune response that's not overactive or underactive. You feel better, your animal feels better, so you're going to give that to your animal. So some of the mushrooms that are powerful, cordyceps is the one that has huge research for increasing oxygenation, ATP synthesis, so your energy, and for a bunch of different antiviral products and improving the immune system. Turkey tail or Coriolis is a big one. I mean, they've used that a lot for cancer and different viral disorders and lung infections and bacterial lung infections. So obviously, turkey tail is going to play in these kind of conditions really well. And there's the PSK and PSP, they're drug-like compounds now. Other ones are chaga, which is quite big now from former Soviet Union up in the high altitudes. They drink it all the time. They seem to live a lot longer, strong immunity. It's probably the strongest long-term for helping with stress, which obviously has an impact on your immune system. And then there's reishi, which has a more calming effect, but it also has probably the most research on it for a lot of these different conditions. And then there's other things like agaricus, Lion's mane is always a favorite for me because lion's mane is a calming for your entire nervous system, your entire nervous system, peripheral, the central nervous system. It can increase in the development of nerves. And nerves, this is our first interaction with our environment, is the mucous membranes, the integument, and your nerves. And then they fire everything else up. So if you can calm your nervous response, then you can mellow the immune system response and improve it. So basically when I say mellow and improve, it sounds like it's contradictory, but really a lot of the immune system response, like I said, is there's overactivity or underactivity. And you need to just try to balance it without it affecting, if people are taking drugs or your animals are taking drugs. It's perfect because you can integrate the different mushrooms when they're in their whole form with all these different drugs. I went on there for a while there.
Yeah, no, Jason, that's great. You explained all the main mushrooms that are so important for our health and our immune system, and explained how they modulate. They don't stimulate much, and all their different properties. I'm grateful. I mean, I've used those medicinal mushrooms in my veterinary practice for over 30 years. It is an integral part of my anti-cancer approach in treating cancer. And one of the parts that made my approaches to cancer in animals so successful. You know, I don't say I cured, but kept animals living much longer with much better quality lives than they were ever expected to. So no, thank you for that. Now, one of the questions that I have for you is, recently in all the studies that I'm reading, there are all these different approaches to how to process the mushrooms, how to manufacture them, how to get the best absorption and the highest concentration of the medicinal properties, okay, and the medicinal components. So what, yours are, like, are world famous for being so beneficial. What process do you use? What should people be looking for? Okay, if you could educate them, like when they go, okay, gosh, I go online and there are all these mushroom supplements, or I go to my health food store and there are all these medicinal mushroom supplements. How do I know what's good, what really is good, what isn't a scam? What isn't, like just someone saying, oh, medicinal mushrooms, I'll make some, and on and on.
So there's a number of factors. Number one, right off the bat, going and picking mushrooms and giving your animal mushrooms that aren't really well picked. Say you pick them or they're from a hothouse. Mushrooms are actually loaded with molds and yeast and other microorganisms that trap in them when they're in the wild. So it sounds great and it's great to eat if you're healthy, but if you've been infected or you're immune compromised, it's not at all good to do. So I would definitely avoid the wild, even though the wild obviously is an amazing thing. But when it comes to these immune compromised states, or when it comes to virus or microbes, it's not where you should go. So that's number one, to stay away from that. Now you've got all these products that are in the supplement form that are specifically dealing with immunity or to deal with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, other mushrooms like lion's mane, right? They're bound up in a chitinous fiber, just like a beetle or a crab, those types of shells. And it's really difficult for us to digest. We can only digest tiny bits of chitin with chitinase, almost nothing. So things are bound up in that chitinous fibrous mesh. So what they've done is in Asia, in Japan, Korea, China, and other parts, they use this mainstream. They use mushroom compounds mainstream, but they inject them. And you can't inject a whole mushroom or your immune system will attack it. So they've basically focused on cancer or immune compromise, and what compound is the one that they're focused on the most are mostly the polysaccharides. And polysaccharides is a general name. It has the glucan class, like alpha and beta glucans. Alpha glucans is just starch. Like amylase, different things, it's a starch compound. That's not necessarily very beneficial. It's the beta glucan portion. Typically, there's other types of the beta glucan is a scaffold that holds all these different compounds that affect the immune system. So you're trying to look for, yes, high polysaccharide content, but of that polysaccharide content, a whole bunch could be just alpha glucan, which is not essential. Then when other companies see it as, okay, you've got this processed mushroom all ground up, but it's bound up in that chitinous fiber, what do you do? So they've extracted it using hot water extracts or that pull out the water soluble compounds, which polysaccharides are one, or alcohol extracts, which pull out the terpenes and other fat soluble compounds, or you can do them both and you grab it. But when you do that, you lose a whole range of other compounds. So it's no longer a synergistic amount of all these different compounds. So those are for us not ideal. So what are you looking for? For me, what we look for, we were giving this product away to cancer and AIDS patients for 2 years. We weren't planning on selling it. We had a mixed compound called Immune 7. That's 6 different mushrooms with grape and tea compounds. Anyway, we're giving it away. So we didn't care what we did. So we wanted the best possible things we were giving in our community to help people. So it didn't matter how much it cost us because we weren't selling it. We weren't trying to make margins or anything. So we thought, okay, what do you do? Number one, you have to make sure that the mushroom that you're buying has huge levels of active ingredient, that it's not mostly starch. And how do you do that? You have to grow it to full maturation. So you want to look for something that's grown to full maturation. Secondly, different parts of the mushroom life cycle, the fruiting body, the mycelia, the spore, they're all producing these different compounds which they exude out of their self, and it affects their environment, whether it be to help the immune system of a tree or a plant that's got a deficient immune system. They'll tie in these mycorrhizae into the rhizomal structures of the plants and the trees, and they'll share their immunity with them. Mushrooms are amazing. They're also liberating all the nutrients in that for them. So in your body, they're having certain types of effects on the way they affect your body to do these certain types of things. So you're going to avoid the wild. You're going to realize that they have to grow to full maturation to convert all of their growth medium into active constituents, polysaccharides, terpenes, and all these other fabulous extracellular compounds they produce. And then you're going to want to grow them inside so they're not affected, like I said, by their microbes, and on a nutrient-rich base. So they basically have all the different vitamins and minerals and everything in them. They're not just a polysaccharide drug, because that acts more like a stimulant in some cases. And then from that, you're going to want to make sure that you actually make it available. And how do you do that? That's the last stage we did, is we have huge active ingredient levels. They're guaranteed over 60%, usually about 85% polysaccharide. And our last test, for instance, for cordyceps was 80% polysaccharide and 35% beta glucan, which is huge. It's like apples to oranges out there. But then to make it available, the best possible production technique is called jet milling or micronization. And what that is you put it in air chambers at high pressure. So you're not grinding it, because too much grinding of any substance damages the active compounds. That's why you can only grind to a certain level, and then companies, pharmaceutical drug, they all extract. But micronization became the top of the heap in the skincare lines, drugs, and with herbs, but it's expensive. We didn't care, like I said, because we were giving it away. It didn't matter. But what that does is in this air chamber at really low temperature, the particles bombard each other, and it breaks up all the chitin into tiny pieces. And they have activity in your body at controlling cholesterol and different things like that, but it releases all the actives. So now all of the actives in synergy, just like they would have used in Chinese medicine or Tibetan medicine, are now available and have activity all over the body. And it's a modulating response, but some of the beauty of this is interacting with the nervous system and the endocrine system, and they're precursors to whether you are in a stress state, same as the animal, or a non-stress parasympathetic state. The parasympathetic, relaxed, clear state of mind is when you heal, is when you have a really strong immune system, is when you just keep things out. Or if they get in, your immune system has a modulated, optimized response. It's not hyperactive or hypoactive. So that's kind of what the mushroom compound is looking for, grown to full maturation, the whole life cycle, high levels of actives, and overall whole food superfood nutrient with trace minerals and everything. And then the micronizing is allowing you to get all of the actives instead of just a couple that are extracted out. So that's why we did that, because we weren't selling, we needed the best product. And then we went to market. So we just don't take the same margins, because we can't on our mushroom division, because the price of them would be way higher. So we just depend on our other products like recovery and different things to share the marketing. And then we're going to start growing our own mushrooms starting next year in facilities in Canada. And right now they're coming from the States.
Ah, great. Oh, thanks for explaining those updates on where you're at with that. Now, for our audience, some of them may be wondering, are there any side effects to the mushrooms, or any contraindications, that they should be aware of for both their animals and themselves? Because like you said, your company has it for all beings.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so this is for me, this is where, like you, when I studying pharmacology has been a big help to me, because when I studied it, my dad was also on a full range of different drugs for heart disease. And so you could see all the things he wasn't allowed to take. He was supposed to die. They gave him 7 years max, and he integrated all these supplements with this. And he's now on his 28th year or 27th year after having a heart attack on the table. He had 6 bypasses and stents, and he's got a pacemaker, defibrillator. Anyway, learned about what you don't want to take with certain drugs. So animals and people on certain drugs, a lot of natural compounds can interact because they act as stimulants or suppressants, a lot of them. So we didn't want stimulants and suppressants. That's why what I was going for is something that you can integrate with all different drugs, people or animals, that doesn't act as a stimulant or suppressant and does not stress the liver or the kidneys. And so that's the beauty of keeping the mushroom whole in a micronized state where all the compounds are acting in synergy, is that you can integrate them with drug safely. And then as far as side effects or anything like that, there really isn't anything other than if, say, there was a mild allergy to them. And that's the thing. Sometimes when people think they're, sorry, not sometimes, most of the time when people think they're allergic to mushrooms, they're not actually allergic to mushrooms. They're allergic to the mold, yeast, and other organisms that are trapped in the fruiting body, in the ribs underneath. And that's why you have to cook them really, really well, but they can still produce antigens that your immune system will react to and have a histamine response. So if you don't, we don't have any of the contaminating organisms. It's grown in a facility with UV filtration in the air, and there's nothing. We don't have to irradiate anything. Most companies would have to irradiate their finished product to get rid of all those molds and yeasts and other microorganisms. We don't have any, so we don't have to worry about that. Another thing makes it really clean and pure, but also that you can integrate safely. And like I said, the only thing, you never know with the whole food, there could be some type of allergy, but that's not typical with our products. So that's another pretty exciting benefit, I'd say.
Oh, that's great. Boy, I thought I knew everything about your products, and I'm learning a lot on this show too. Thanks for explaining that because there are so many other products out there that say medicinal mushrooms, oh great, and they're processed a certain way, and it all sounds good. You say, oh, that's impressive, but
Yeah,
the details that you're giving are invaluable for everyone here. Thank you.
perfect. I'm glad I could do that.
So I think that covers medicinal mushrooms. We've covered what they are, how they work, any side effects, how they're manufactured, things that you're suggesting make sure people look for, when they're looking online or anything. And from what I understand, your products, Purica Supplements, are available throughout North America.
Yep.
They're one of the only ones that Health Canada, which is very, very strict, has approved.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we have what's it called? Natural product numbers. Like it's like a drug number in Canada. We go through stringent testing and research, and you have to prove the mechanisms of action. And then in the animal industry, we have the Veterinary Product Directorate, and they will either disallow or allow you with a veterinary product number. It just shows the safety within different species of animals. It shows the efficacy, and then you get the vet product number, the VPN. So if it has a number, it's showing that it has safety and also across species use. And if it doesn't, then you can only get the VPN, or in the human side, the NPN, for use in certain types. In the vet industry, obviously you have to look at different species with cats, dogs, things like that. So again, what we're producing is safe for cats and dogs as well.
Awesome. Wow. Thanks again for all this valuable information. I can see everyone, the viewers going, wow, that's really great to know. I didn't know. I'm excited and everything. So that's great. Now, where everyone is quarantined and it's challenging getting to their veterinarian now, you also have some great supplements for arthritis, for geriatrics,
Yeah.
for post-op recovery, because some animals, they've just gone through surgery. We had one on the show last week, Dachshund, that had gone through back surgery, and now she was doing acupuncture and laser therapy to help it recover, but she can't get to the veterinarian and is wondering what she can do now. And she isn't alone. I'm sure there are tons of people out there that have animals that had been through surgery or they're very old and they're like, well, I can't get to my vet. What can I do? What supplements do you have? I know I've used Recovery for myself, which
Yeah.
really helped me recover from a surgery. But so if you can go over the different supplements that can be beneficial to our animal loving audience in this challenging time where they may not be able to get to their veterinarian as much as they'd like to.
So there's two of them. There's the Recovery, and then there's also one called Curcumin Plus, which is a fraction of curcumin called curcumin 3. So I can talk about both. The Recovery has kind of an interesting backstory. Really quick, is it was actually developed working behind the scenes in the European ballets, the Royal Dutch Ballet and Netherlands Dance Theatre, worked with dancers from Frankfurt Ballet with anterior cruciate ligament tear and recovery from surgery or injury, and getting them right back to principal positions, which is almost unheard of because the scar tissue and the reduced rotational movement in the joints. But what was happening was working with what became recovery later was autoimmune disease progression. So there's a lot of autoimmune disease. In other words, things like rheumatoid arthritis, sometimes even mild MS, or Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, or psoriasis or eczema, things like that, or polyarthritis, polymyalgia, like fibromyalgia, these kind of symptoms. A lot of the dancers are presenting symptoms. I think it's because they're under hyper amounts of stress. And to cope with that stress, they typically smoke a lot, which can inhibit parts of the immune system, but also to keep their weights down. A lot of the women are using, because they're the ones that typically get weighed in, have eating disorders. And eating disorders degrade that moat I was talking about earlier. So it's interesting because pain and chronic pain, or even osteoarthritic degenerative pain that maybe you had an injury, is exacerbated or accelerated, or the causal feature is that the barriers are breaking down and you start absorbing all these things from your digestive tract, all the billions, trillions of different microbial cells start getting into your bloodstream, and they start attacking it. So the premise was for recovery was to actually improve the barriers throughout your body and the lungs, gastrointestinal tract, and improve the cells inside your tissue to stop the degradation and to stop the infiltration. What then do you get? You get reduced inflammation and you get controlled blood sugar. So the recovery not only works for chronic pain and really well. It went in those studies in the horse journal in Connecticut there, where there was the 17 products compared in the horse industry, and even including injections, the best products in the world. We're the only Canadian company. And they came on top. They said, even when every other product failed to get a result in a 2-year trial, Recovery EQ, that's the horse version, had 80 to 100% recovery in every single horse. So this is phenomenal. They even had to redo the trial because the vets thought they made a mistake with our product, because even when it didn't work with anything else, with chronic tendonitis, degenerative joint disease in the back and the neck, recovery worked. I think that's because if you change the barriers, you keep things out, your moat and your alligator type thing. And also you're impacting with different compounds, actual mechanisms in your cell that are associated with healing and decreasing degeneration. And again, something that you can safely integrate with drugs. So things like Medicam in the dog, or Adequan, or corticosteroids, or any of the other non-steroidal like Butte, things like that, you can integrate it safely. And then working with your vet, hopefully weeding off all the different drugs that are causing issues, say the kidney, liver, or causing accelerated aging like the corticosteroid class does. So recovery, that's that one. And then another interesting thing you could tie back to the virus, but also chronic pain and associated with inflammation, is that curcumin 3 fraction, which is called BDMC. Curcumin's been huge, right? You've got turmeric, which is the spice, the root. It's about 3 to 5% curcumin, being used for thousands of years in Ayurvedic medicine, Tibetan medicine, Chinese medicine. They know what it works for pain, mild to moderate. They know that it works for digestive issues, things like that, and skin, and a whole range, helps the liver, all these things they've known. But in the West, they found one of the compounds, curcumin, that has the most pain activity, anti-pain or pain relieving activity. So they extracted it out to 95%. They've been using it quite successfully for mild to moderate pain. But just recently, a PhD that was another friend of mine, he's been doing research because he had colitis, severe, from athletics, chronic inflammatory in his gut, which also animals get, especially when they're under stress. Athletes get it a lot because they're degrading that moat to steal glutamine for the muscles. Anyway, he found out that certain products he took 20 years ago even though they all said they were 95% curcumin, some had stronger effects. So he took it to the lab and he found out that curcumin is like estrogens or progesterones or polysaccharides. It's the name for a group of compounds. And normal curcumin has curcumin 1, 2, and 3. And curcumin 1 and 2 compose about 99.5% of the curcumin complex. The ones that had the highest curcumin 3, even if it was just a 0.5% higher, had tremendous benefits on his colitis. So he got it extracted, concentrated. Now we use the curcumin 3 at 30% instead of 0.5%. A tiny amount of it is a really powerful anti-inflammatory, comparative, and goes beyond the anti-inflammatory activity of, say, ibuprofen and aspirin, things like that, without the side effects of inhibited healing and degeneration of gut lining. Actually helps to improve the moat instead of NSAIDs typically degrade the moat. So you shouldn't be using those NSAIDs very frequently. Anyway, those are the two ones: the curcumin plus, which has hyaluronic acid, curcumin 3, and glucosamine. You take tiny amounts of it, you can add it to their food. And then there's the recovery, which is whole body health. It's improving the moats, increasing healing, and you can integrate both of them with any type of drug.
Oh, that's great. I mean, the amount of research that you've put into this and figuring out, because honestly, you go online or you go to a health food store and there are all these different
Oh yeah,
bottles of turmeric and curcumins and also different glucosamine supplements. And then you go and you say, oh, okay, well, they all look like they have the same thing and this one's much less. I'll try this one.
yeah,
And it's great to know the amount of research you've put in to getting the ones that are the most efficacious. And that study in Connecticut, my home, before moving to the island here,
yeah.
and that's great. So the next thing, something you've talked about, I've talked about over and over again in all these shows, is the human animal bond and the impact of our peace, happiness, and health on our animals. And what I published on my last book, the trans-species field and the compassionate field theory, that we are creating an electromagnetic and a vast array of fields, energetic fields between us and our animals. So when we're stressed, they're stressed. That's part of the healing power of animals. When they're just purring on us or nuzzling and loving us and our stress goes down, so we create, and they're giving us this beautiful unconditional love, that's so healing to us.
Yeah.
And in this time where we're all quarantined together, I mean, I saw that one joke where the cat goes, oh my God, what are you doing in my territory now? You're here all day, you know? And how we're impacting on their stress, and they're trying to calm us down. But when they see us stressed, there's also the behavioral things. They see us all stressed, so they get stressed, because like dogs, part of their job is to keep us happy. And right. So you and I, for over 15 years, have talked about our own personal practices, mind-body medicine practices that we use to try, in the midst of all the challenges of life, how to modulate our stress. And so I've been sharing my approaches here and there with my audience, but I would love for you to share any suggestions and tips on, as we're in quarantine, how do we stay calm, peaceful, happy, de-stressed for both our health and our animal friends' health?
Yeah. So I think from the Indo-Tibetan teaching, because I did the 10-year monastic program, but they take you through different levels. They start you with the calm idea, which I like the box breathing. You've seen that box breathing where you basically breathe in first bit. You have a picture of, you can look them up on the internet, you can get GIFs, and they basically come in and out the image, and you breathe, you attune your breath with that, and then you hold, and then you breathe in, and then you hold, but it's doing it for you. And then you'll find that in basically enacts that dorsal vagus reflex that gets you in the parasympathetic relaxed state. You can do it in as little as 90 seconds. So if you're whipped up, your mind's really whipped up in thoughts or something happened, you can calm it down really, really quickly. And then they say, let thoughts do their thing. So I mean, that's what, I know this, you let them do their thing. You don't try to stop them. You don't grab onto them. Just let them float around like clouds. but you're just staying with the breath, and don't beat yourself up, fall away. That's the idea. I think for me, the biggest part is sometimes people take up something like meditation, or they focus on the breath and they get really calm and it seems wonderful. But then they have an instance where somebody comes that they don't like, or something happens and they spaz. I mean, sometimes it's actually worse spaz than they normally would, because now you're trying to change your whole environment in order to stay calm. And I think that's like a competition with your environment. So I feel like the Tibetans are trying to teach you, and the Indians trying to teach you to let go is the more important thing. Let go of even the experience of calm. Use the box breath, and you can quickly just drop into the breath. And then anything that comes up, don't judge or anything. It's about letting go of the idea of having to be thinking all the time. You know what I mean? Just trying to let go of the thinking all the time and seeing what's the Tibetans call it, we have our heads in the clouds. You know what I mean? They all say it's like you have your heads in the storm clouds all the time. You think that's your identity, your thoughts, your opinions, what you look like, all that stuff is your head in the clouds. But really, the nature of your mind is like blue sky mind. So I feel like if you can get that, even for short periods of time, then you can familiarize with it once you've had a taste, and then the animals are going to relate to that, and then it even makes you, I think, calm down more just sitting with your animals. You know, there's that one of the memes that has a picture of a dog sitting beside a guy on a bench, and then they have pop-ups for the guy's mind, and he's thinking about what happened yesterday, what he's got to buy, which kind of car he'd like, all these pop-ups, and the dog, his pop-up is him sitting with the guy on the bench. So, I mean, if we could do like them, we're not really we're trying to get more of what they have when they're calm, obviously with us. And then I like too, the idea of touch for oxytocin release, right? With the hypothalamic extension of the posterior pituitary, that you're getting that oxytocin release, which is really calming and bonding. Obviously, that breath technique can initiate that reflex. So in other words, if you can do a box breathing technique that you find on the internet, that can increase the release of oxytocin, and that can set you into a relaxed state. So, I mean, neurochemistry and Indo-Tibetan studies, they really mesh. And I feel like maybe that's huge for our pets. That's what it really excites me, is that kind of meeting right now. And then, oh my God, I told you, learning about how the immune system works. Look up YouTube videos on Crash Course or things like that. Just learn about that barrier immunity, the innate immunity, the adaptive. So you feel more confident that, hey, that immune system is pretty miraculous, like pretty impressive. If I can keep it healthy and know what to do, I'll be calmer, and that's going to obviously benefit the pet as well.
Yeah, thanks for explaining all of that so well, because so much of that is what I've been sharing on the show is that trans-species field. And when I talk about the compassionate field, that's where we bring in our intention. Yeah. The trans-species field happens in an animal hospital, an animal shelter, in every home. And it's like you said, the person's thinking, and the dog's just looking like that. And so with the compassionate field, if we focus on compassion for all beings, and it changes our neurochemistry and brings us into the parasympathetic state, then that whole field between us calms down. And that's what I used to teach my staff and at the animal hospital. And you see, or when I go to horse barns, and the horse barns that took this in, they started going and saying, wow, the horses are happier, all the animals, everyone is happier here. You know, and that's where in some of the earlier shows I started talking about, I'm in the midst of, well, not me, this is a co-creation with everyone who's coming to me through the shows, of creating what I call the acronym CALM, the Conscious Animal Lovers Movement, is that this healing power of the love of animals is a global thing. I've seen wherever I've taught all over the world, you start talking about someone and their animal and they just melt.
Yeah.
And you see this. And so and we have the scientific basis of understanding that now. So it's the beauty, what you and I have chatted about for years, is we're at a beautiful time right now, the bridging of science and spirituality. And so thank you for coming on the show. We could go over talk about this for hours. We're running a little short, but I am loving that we're ending with this, because this an invitation to everyone to help co-create this conscious animal lovers movement, because it has the potential of uniting animal lovers all over the world to be a powerful healing force for all of us, which we all know now more than ever we can use that.
Yes.
So I really want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and everything, and wishing everyone out there the best health and happiness, and to keep ourselves calm, supporting our own immune system, and then all the nutritional supplements that we learned about today, to help keep us as healthy and happy as we can be during these challenging times. With that, again, thank you, and thank all my animal loving audience. Thank you all for being here, and thank Awake TV for hosting this and for having my show on, and thank Amanda and John, the co-founders of Awake TV, for creating this really important avenue these days for sharing knowledge about raising the vibration of humanity, which is the theme for Awake TV. So thank you all. May healthy, happy forces be with you. And we'll see you next week when we continue on exploring different ways to keep us as healthy and happy as possible. Bye for now.